Okay, now it's 5 o'clock. We're ready to get started. 5 o'clock, Tuesday, June 7th, 2022. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the St. Croix County Board of Supervisors. We're fortunate for our invocation today to welcome back Tim Sackett. So, Tim, you are on.
So there we go. Thank you so much. So now I have to back up a little bit, I guess. So peace. We all long for it. Right now, we really want to see peace in our streets, our shopping centers, our schools, our churches, our workplaces, and the list goes on. But I find it interesting as I've been in ministry and studied the Bible a lot. Jesus said something in John 14:27, and he says, "My peace I give to you. I do not give it as the world gives." And he was making it clear that he's not going to give peace the way we think he's going to give it. He's not going to give peace the way we think God wants peace in this world. The difficult situation is that conflicts and hostility are here to stay. They never go away. Our way of thinking about peace is the absence of conflict, the absence of hostility. But it's not that way. What Jesus said is that I will be with you in the midst of the conflict. Just like when the disciples were in the middle of the storm in the boat. Jesus was with them in the boat, and he said they shouldn't be afraid. And I think he's saying to us is that I am with you today, and you shouldn't be afraid. Not that you shouldn't be cautious, not that you shouldn't be aware, but the world will always have conflict, and we're just going to have to face them. And I think even in a small, shrink it down to this room, I think we can all appreciate what you do here in a way that you state what has to be stated, and you discuss it, and you decide, and many times you have to agree to disagree. And you remain calm, and ultimately you find peace amongst yourselves, and you come back again and again and again. And that is kind of a small little microcosm of the church, of God's kingdom, is that you agree to disagree, but you do it in a way that you can come back again and again and again. Let's pray. Lord God, if only there was a way in which you would guarantee that all of the hostility, anger, hatred, violence, if it would all just disappear. But you know every human heart, and I pray that you would encourage us and embolden us to be aware of what's around us and who's around us so that we can do our best day by day to be safe and to be at peace. So as the discussions in this room carry on month by month, I just pray that you would do the same thing here, is to bring peace that there's a good reason for discussion and debate and decisions, because it's who we are as a nation, it's who we are as a county. And we pray that you would always be with us. For everyone who trusts in you and seeks you, you said that you'll be with them and give them your peace. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, our roll call is complete. So I guess we are now ready for public comment. Do we have anyone? I'm sure we have someone from the public who would like to make a comment. Steve?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Stephen Shallop, and with my family, we dairy farm south of Hammond in Pleasant Valley Township. And I wanted to join you briefly this evening to wish you a happy June Dairy Month, the month where we remember all our dairy heritage and celebrate that tradition. I brought some cheese snacks over here. Please enjoy. The 3 cheeses were carefully selected by my mother-in-law, and she wanted you to experience some of the cheese-making tradition that goes with June Dairy Month. She sent some cheese curds, which are the very freshest form of cheese. They're soft, they're squeaky, they're very high moisture, and as we know, they're good to deep fry. The second one was a 3-month-aged Gouda. Gouda is pretty unique because it needs to be aged that several months, and it needs to be aged in an extremely specific humidity and temperature controlled room. If those very specific elements aren't followed, that Gouda flavor doesn't develop. The last one is a medium cheddar. It's been aged about 6 months. And if you stored our cheese curd, it would eventually transition, if you will, to that mild medium cheddar flavor that you have. It's a little less moisture, a little more flavor. So I hope you enjoy from the dairy farmers in our county. I wanted to share that agriculture is a big deal in St. Croix County. I put a sheet at each of your desks. It's a couple years old, but it still says that agriculture produces $712 million of economic activity within our county, and I would venture to say at today's commodity prices that number is significantly higher. And so directly or indirectly, agriculture supports a lot of families within our communities. I was trying to think of what other message I wanted to share tonight, and it really came down to this as a take-home message. I want you to know that St. Croix County farmers, we're here for the long run, we're here to do it right, and we're happy to share with you what we're doing. I really encourage you to reach out, ask questions, and learn about our modern farming world, because it has changed significantly. Better yet, I'd encourage you to experience some of the farming activities this summer that are going on. The county fair is July 20th to 24th, and Farm City Day is Saturday, August 13th, and our family will be hosting that at our dairy farm. If you're not familiar, Farm City Day is an open house with free lunch, a wagon ride, farm tour, activities for the kids, other displays. It's a really fun event. The inspiration for Farm City Day that I always like to share was from a couple of local farmers that felt the county was getting more urban with less people growing up on the farm. That was in 1982. And we've been holding Farm City Day ever since. So happy June Dairy Month. Please enjoy lots of cheese, ice cream, and your other favorite dairy treats. We'll hope to see you out at Farm City Day. We'd really enjoy having you. So thank you for all you do to serve our communities, and thanks for the chance to speak tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for the cheese. Everybody help yourself. Other public comment. Do we have anyone else from the public who would like to make a comment tonight? Don't be shy. Any other public comment? Yes, sir. Yes, Tim.
Yes. Hopefully you got my sheet of paper that I signed to make a comment. So once again, my name is Tim Sackett. I live in Hudson. And my comment has to do, hopefully it won't ruffle feathers, because something like this is ruffling feathers these days. But Memorial Day was coming, and I looked at my flagpole in my yard and realized that my flag was pretty bad, so I went and got a new one. And I grew up as a Boy Scout, so I've always honored the flag. I've always understood the reason for the flag and all that. And so the U.S. flag, we pledge allegiance to it. It's all well and good. June 14th, next week, is a day in America called Flag Day, and it's not a federal holiday, but I found out something interesting, that June 14th day goes back to the 1777 Congress, the second Congress in Philadelphia. They created the flag and made a resolution in Congress as to the stripes and the stars and the blue field and all that. So June 14th goes back to 1777, but the day that we have Flag Day actually started in Wisconsin. And I guess that's probably where I wanted to go. The first real celebration that recognized June 14th was held in Waukesha, Wisconsin, which is between Milwaukee and Sheboygan, near Port Washington. B.J. Seagren was a school teacher. He celebrated the day with the students in his class, and he continued to advocate for June 14th as Flag Day. This was way back in 1885. And by 1916, President Wilson declared the date of June 14th as the U.S. Congress formally made the proclamation again in 1949. And 1949 was 17 years after B.J. Seagren passed away. B.J. once noted that he had given more than 2,100 speeches about patriotism and the flag. And this was in the late 1800s. So that's a lot of travel for somebody that probably walked and rode a horse and did all that. But yeah, so Wisconsin is a place where our June 14th Flag Day really got kicked in and motivated by a school teacher. And I thought that was an interesting fact. We have just passed Memorial Day and D-Day coming up on Flag Day, and I just thought this is just something that I had to gush out in front of you today. And I think it's great that we have a symbol for our country, as all countries in the world do. But I think it's something to be most proud of. So thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Other public comment? Any other public comment? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Supervisor Osnes, second. Supervisor Hanson. And we're ready to vote. Almost ready. The consent agenda is approved. So we're going to move on to our presentations. We are very fortunate this evening or this afternoon to have Jim Wood from Competitive Wisconsin with us. So Jim, we're going to turn it over to you. Bob, if you'd like to make a little introduction.
Sure. As Jim is coming to the podium, and be sure, Jim, to use the microphone when you get there. Jim is the Strategic Council to Competitive Wisconsin. It's a non-political organization, a huge one. That's a consortium of business, agriculture, education, and labor. And their goal is to make Wisconsin more competitive in every way. Jim's got an amazing background. I won't go through it all, Jim, but he's had sensational careers in government here in Wisconsin, in academia, and in the private sector. Earlier today, Jim addressed the Economic Development Corporation of St. Croix County, full house, kept them for a nice time, but then afterwards they kept him for another half hour asking questions. So it's my privilege to introduce Jim Wood, of Competitive Wisconsin.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. Thanks, Bob and Bob. I appreciate it very much. I have to tell you, I am always pleased to come to local government. I've been doing this, I turn 80 next month, so I've been doing this for a very long period of time. And I am always struck by the importance of the last resort. When federal government doesn't work and the state government's not as handy as they ought to be, you are the folks that make a difference in terms of whether the lights go on, the doors open, people can breathe the air, whatever else it may be. So I cannot thank you enough for the commitment you make. I know this is not easy. I know it's whatever. And so, as Bob suggested, I gave a presentation earlier today with lots of slides and graphs. And at the end of it, I think everybody agreed that that would not be the thing to do this evening at your board meeting. So you can thank them after I've left that I'm not going to drag you through that. My job then is to take 10 minutes or so and interest you in what Competitive Wisconsin is doing and why we're doing it. So let me get on with doing it. And I will tell you lastly that the vice chair of Competitive Wisconsin is Mark O'Connell, who I assume you know is the president and CEO of the Wisconsin Counties Association. I am not here to sell you anything, okay? And I'm not here to ask for money. So right away, that puts me in a relatively small group of people, okay? What I am here to do is to ask you to think about some things as you go forward, and specifically as you go forward at this moment in time. I watched you come out of the building earlier today and go over to have your photograph taken. And I didn't know whether it was a gigantic cigarette break or had been a fire alarm or something. And I finally figured out what was going on. So this moment has been memorialized. And I'd like to give you just a couple of other thoughts to memorialize it about, okay? If you think about this, I'll give you 4 numbers, okay? If I can find them here. Yeah, they're here someplace. I'll have to make them up. Oh, for heaven's sakes, what's that about? At any rate, well, I can do it. I can do it. As you had your picture taken, in this state, we are at least 100,000 workers short. Operating companies looking for workers. Nearly 2/3, if not more than 2/3, are what are called high-demand jobs, okay? People where there's a larger number of jobs being required and where the per capita is above the state's per capita income, okay? 62,000 of those that we know about, okay? So that's the moment that you find yourself in. We're not going to fix that one worker at a time. We're going to need a strategy that enables us to go forward on that. In 2021, 1,062,000 people moved from one state to another in the United States of America. 1/3, roughly 35%, moved to one of 3 states, Texas, Florida, or Arizona. Another third moved to just 6 other states. In 2021, 3,370, give or take a nickel, came to Wisconsin. We are not going to fix it banking on the odds of migration with that kind of pattern at work, okay? In 2018, from one of the charts this morning, we hired Deloitte to tell us how much filling a job, one of those high-demand jobs, would produce in new revenues, new public revenues and new private revenues. So we found a revenue stream not in creating jobs, but in filling jobs. They're there, they're ready to go. You get somebody in the door and they start paying taxes right away. Here's a number for you. In 2018, there were some 6,000 plus nurse shortages in the state of Wisconsin, high demand, but about 4,000 of those were what's called churn. They were moving around in the market, okay? But about 2,178 of those positions were either retirements or people exiting. So he said to Deloitte, what's that worth? And the answer is it was worth, for the associate degree nurse, about $8,200 in new public revenue annually, and about $31,000 annually in private sector new revenue. So roughly $40,000 for every one of those positions. If you take that out over a 5-year period of time, that's $400 million of revenue that we're not getting because we didn't fill those positions in 2018 because we didn't have a mechanism for doing it, okay? So we're busy looking for those kinds of mechanisms and saying, where is all of that going, all right? So back to the moment in time. So all of that is a moment in time for you. The last number is that if you add up the amount of money that will go to local governments from the American Rescue Plan Act and to state government, and you leverage on top of that the infrastructure money that's likely to come in here, and the COVID money that's yet to come in here, and a few other nickels and dimes, on the existing calendars, people are talking about spending somewhere between $6 and $9 billion in the state of Wisconsin that was not on the balance sheets anywhere a year and a half ago, okay? So here's the request, okay? We find ourselves facing historic challenges. We don't have the bodies we need, okay? You folks have got money and an opportunity to do something with that money. So in addition to having historic challenges, we have historic opportunities here. And the question is whether or not we can put the pieces together in a fashion that makes sense. Well, I thought you were going to time me. I don't know where I am on this. Okay. I'll whip right along that, okay? In June of last year, Competitive Wisconsin convened along with the UW System, the Counties Association, League of Wisconsin Municipalities and Towns Association, a statewide summit for local officials on the ARPA question, okay? At that ARPA session, we had about 400 local officials and community leaders show up for it, virtually, I would add, of course. And 3 things came out of it. One was everybody agreed across the board, workforce recruitment, workforce shortages is the #1 issue we're confronting in the state. The second thing that they agreed on was that in order to be able to compete for the workers that we acknowledge we need now, we have to have our communities be more competitive. And they identified 8 areas that they thought would warrant examination for ARPA investment. They're not going to come as a surprise. It's housing, it's broadband, it's early care and education, it's energy, it's rural resurgence, it's healthcare, and I'm always going to forget 2 or 3, but I'll send you the presentation so you can get the list. Third thing that came up was the question of where's the private sector in all of this, okay? What role do they want to play? What role can they play? What role should they play? We spent the last 6.5 months going around the state talking to private sector leaders, public sector leaders, academics, et cetera. And we have, and this is the, so you can be aware of it. This is not, I'm not selling you something, I'm just telling you we're doing it, okay? So the question was, what is there a role for the private sector and Competitive Wisconsin at this moment in time? And we identified 3 things that we think can make a difference. We're pretty good at putting together context and background information on situations. So we can help on every one of those issues. We can, we will, and are producing a digital context library that local officials can go and look at on housing, on broadband, et cetera, in terms of what's going on in Wisconsin, what's going on elsewhere, what other people are trying to do, et cetera. The second thing that we think we can do, and again, we say this in consultation with people in local government, is that the private sector does a pretty good job of doing results-oriented decision-making, and they do that by running decisions through 6 filters. The first filter is the context filter. The second filter is what's called sustainability. Where's the money coming from? How are you going to invest it? Where's the revenue stream come? How long does this run? When does it come online, et cetera? The third is, after you've got sustainability and context, you say, what's my priorities under these circumstances? Once you've identified priorities, you take a look at what best practices are. And then when you've got all of that put together, you have a due diligence issue, which is say, okay, know what I want to concentrate on, know what I want to do. Can I make it happen? Okay. And the classic example these days is broadband. Everybody cares about broadband. A lot of money is going to get spent on it. You got timelines on that. Everybody's looking at a series of different kinds of strategies. Fascinating. The question is, if we were 100,000 workers short before this money came in, where's that workforce coming from? Okay? Because other states are doing the same thing. There is no way on God's green earth, in my personal opinion, we can do what we want to do in broadband within the timelines that have been set by the United States Congress at the moment. So there'll be some shift in that. But so we looked at that and we said, here's what we will do. We will run what's called an action accelerator example on each of these 8 or 9 issues. And we will do one in each of the major regional economic development areas so that people can take a look at how that issue would work itself through those particular filters. So we've already done the one on early care and education with the 7 Rivers down in La Crosse. We are scheduled on August 11th in Eau Claire on workforce recruitment, attraction, and retention, and I'd urge you to pay attention to that, and if you can come to it, please do attend it. We are doing housing on August 18th. We're doing transportation on August 30th, and I'm missing one. We're doing broadband with New North on the 14th of July. So we have another 3 or 4 to schedule, but those have come together in every single case. They're being co-convened with the Chamber of Commerce and a regional economic development area, being co-hosted by the campuses, Technical and UW campus. So I'm going to wrap up. Hopefully I'm not overstaying my welcome here with this thought. We absolutely do not want to tell you folks in local government how to spend your money. We do believe, however, that the private sector and the general public are part of that context, okay? That if we're not part of the conversations, we can't help you understand what we need in order to thrive. And you miss out, we believe, on some skill sets and some concerns and some resources that we can bring to the table. And we'd like you to think about that. That's the request. The last comment I will make is that the way in which we pay for public services is about to change in the United States of America. It ain't going to change overnight. But what we are discovering is that we are totally out of sync between the demand for the service and the amortization of when the value comes in from the service, et cetera. So what's happening is there is a growing interest in private sector stocks in understanding the value that investment in companies brings to a community or to a nation. There needs to be, we believe, a larger recognition of the value that public sector services bring to a community. We all pay lip service to it. What we're suggesting is people need to begin to take a look at actually measuring it, okay? And quantifying it, and understand how you would monetize it, and understand how you collect the value added from the people who are getting the value added, okay? And so that's going to be an important piece of the equation going forward, we think, in order to, we do all the rest of this work. So let me stop there. Ultimately, where Wisconsin finds itself at the moment, there is no better investment any community can make than the one you make in attracting new workers and new families to your community. Absolutely none. What the record is indicating at the moment is you can't do that if you don't deal with your housing issue, your broadband issue, your early care and education issue, and on across the board. And that's a challenge for you folks because you got existing services and existing demands, okay? The challenge, I think, and I'll leave you with this. He promised for the 4th time. I'll leave you with this. Look at it as it's a decision. We sometimes don't get the full balance sheet on the decision. I hear people say, well, I don't want any more people in my neighborhood. I get that, and you represent some of those people. They don't want life to change. I get that, and you represent some of those people. The question is whether the life that they have right now that they want to keep is sustainable given what's happening to the economy that supports that. Okay? So the challenge is not an either or, it's a how do we put the pieces together in a fashion that addresses that question. And that's what Competitive Wisconsin and the folks who are supporting the Wisconsin Tomorrow Initiative would like. So thank you again very, very much for your time, your patience. And as both Bobs know, I'll come back as many times as you'd like me, okay? So thank you very much. Good luck with it.
I'll ask, are you open for any quick questions? If anyone would have a quick question for Jim? Supervisor?
I'll do my best to stumble through some of this. So with demographics being that boomers are retiring in droves, that's roughly 60 million people in the population. And then Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, they're all here. And we're at 4% unemployment. Where do we get these people to fill these 100,000 jobs?
Well, the harsh answer, and nobody likes it, is you got to steal them from your neighbors, not in-state, not in-state, okay? So Competitive Wisconsin is committed to creating an environment in which Wisconsin employers have an edge in this process. And we think we can do that by recognizing the numbers that we gave you on the nurse, okay? That in that particular case, based on other research, we're saying what you should do is create an environment in which every employer, when they offer, after they've done their own wage package and benefit package, could put another $20,000 on the table, amortized over a 5-year period of time, that could be spent not on one thing or another like other states have done, but you could spend it on housing, or you could spend it on transportation, or you could spend it on early care and education. You'd be encouraged to have it invested in the community in which you're living and which you're going to. You sign a contract, says you'll work there for 5 years, got clawback provisions. No money gets paid out until money gets paid in. And we think that that's a possibility. The second piece is you need a bonding piece using the same kind of funding mechanisms on a different timeline to get students coming in through the tech colleges and the university. We've got this massive and excellent educational infrastructure, and they're confronting, declining enrollments. We think if you target the millennial children that are in junior high and senior high schools in the 6 states around Wisconsin, and that's pretty close to 1 million kids, and you draw a circle that says keep it within 300-400 miles, so they're within the home circles, and we've looked at that kind of research. Bring them in here, and same kind of numbers will work. You just have to bond for it because they don't start working right away. And so we think that that's possible, but it is about getting residents. And if you all are bringing in, we solve all of this problem in the next couple of years, then we can come together in about 4 or 5 years and talk about what we do to save the rest of the country. But at the moment, I'm here for Wisconsin. And the one last piece is none of this stuff happens overnight. So the other piece that we really want people to think about is we're going to be looking at a 3 to 5 year transition plan. Okay, you're going to have to manage these things over a 3 to 5 year period of time. That's going to require collaboration and attention. So.
Supervisor Rambert?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. St. Croix County is one of the fastest growing counties in the state and has been for quite some time. What do you see as an advantage that we would have over other counties in this state with these 100,000 and being so close to the Twin Cities that others may not?
Yep. Well, clearly, so when we do it, we call it workforce recruitment, attraction, and retention, okay? And the reason that the attraction is highlighted is that areas that are on the border, areas that have the energy that you folks have been able to generate up here and other kinds of things going on, it is a logical strategy for you to pitch people based upon what you have here, okay? And you're further down the road in a lot of the things, housing and some other bits and pieces, than some other counties are. So you can make the argument that it makes sense for you to invest in an attraction campaign as long as that is a targeted campaign, okay, in which you talk about, so I know, for example, UW-Eau Claire and the Eau Claire Chamber of Commerce have identified all of the UW-Eau Claire graduates who live in Minnesota, okay? So that's a targeted population. They can break it out by age and then zero in more effectively. So I think that's a piece of it. But the other piece of it is, when we look at rural resurgence, the two things that make a difference in rural resurgence are people and employment, okay? I mean, you got to get bodies in here and you got to turn them into jobs that generate stuff. Counties that are close to urban populations, counties that are close, like as this area is, have a distinct advantage in being able to say, we can do that, okay? If you take a look at the models that people are looking at in terms of rural resurgence, you look at things like distribution clusters, okay? You say, because you could manufacture something, you get light manufacturing in a rural area that borders an urban area or a denser population area, you can produce economies of scale because of land and wage prices, et cetera, which you can then, but you couldn't do that if you didn't live next to Minneapolis or what have you. So there are a variety of different things, I think, that are worth looking at there.
Thank you, Jim. I really appreciate your time.
Appreciate it.
Okay, let's move on to the financial or county administrator's report, financial report for April.
Yeah, starting on page 149 of the packet is the financial report. I guess the highlights from that are the report is through April. We've collected about 30% of our revenues and spent about 30% of our expenses. So that's pretty much right on track with where I would expect us to be. When you get to the capital project fund, on page 153 of the packet, you can see that most of the projects are staying on target and budget. We did have one project that's gone over budget. That's the Emergency Communications Command Vehicle. They have stopped spending money now, so they won't be over anymore. And then the last page of that financial packet is the ARPA dollars. So we take a look at where we're at with ARPA spending, and the projects are starting to accumulate some of their expenses. You can see that on there. And then we still have the $10 million balance that we've classified as lost revenues, but we haven't allocated an expense for yet. And I don't think we've gotten the money yet. No, we haven't gotten the second tranche of money yet, but we're expecting it pretty soon. Are there any questions on the financial report?
Supervisor Hanson?
Has the detox operation begun operating?
You talk about ARPA project.
ARPA project,
Yep.
Detox Withdrawal Management Services.
Yeah. There's been no funds expended on that yet, so I would say no.
Oh, okay.
Other questions? We'll move on to broadband.
Yeah, Supervisor Telejohn had requested an update on broadband. So in your packet, starting on page 156, I think it kind of starts with where the PSC is with their grants. We had awarded 8 of the 9 grant applications in St. Croix County. Those were matching grants, though, for PSC grants that were being written. The PSC is still reviewing those. They have not awarded those grants. They received 194 applications, $495 million in projects for the $100 million that they have. So they're only going to award probably about 20% of those. You can see a whole cluster of grants. If you look at the map, you can see a whole cluster of grants in our area. So we do have a lot of interest, and hopefully we get quite a bit of money coming our way. But until the PSC awards those grants, I don't know which projects in St. Croix County are going to be a go. The other thing I did want to highlight then, it didn't make the packet, it's fairly new, but Wisconsin has joined the National Internet for All initiative. So there's a federal program of $65 billion related just to broadband. Wisconsin has signed up to be one of the participating states in that. There's a $100 million minimum guarantee for every state that participates, and then more, obviously, based upon the needs in each of the states. So Wisconsin's on board for that. So there's a new federal level NITIA, which is the National Internet for All Initiative. So a new federal program that Wisconsin's going to be involved in. So there'll be more coming out on broadband related to that. Otherwise, are there any other questions about broadband or any specific issues that I didn't cover, Supervisor Telejohn, that you wanted? No? Okay.
Supervisor Otino?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been a while since I looked at the numbers, but when we first put this money out towards broadband, it turned out to be there was 34 or 3,500 homes that we were able to service. And the amount of money we put forward, it turned out to be about $7,500 per home. Is that still, or are we reaching more people so that cost comes down? Because at that cost, there's not enough money to put broadband in every household in St. Croix County.
Right.
Thank you.
You're remembering the numbers better than I am off the top of my head, but the numbers have not changed. So the numbers are still the same numbers that I'd presented before. And it was, multiple thousands of dollars per household, because broadband is covering a lot of the city areas, but it's not covering the rural areas. So that's what the initiative is right now, is to make sure that all of those rural areas are covered. And it's akin to rural electrification back in the 1910s, 1920s, whenever that rolled through. I wasn't around then, so I don't remember it very well. But it's the same thing. It becomes more and more expensive the further and further apart that these properties are. So you're right, it is expensive if you look at it on a per capita basis. So I guess the question is do you consider broadband as important as electricity is?
Supervisor Cook?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple other comments. The $100 million that's coming from the federal infrastructure bill, I know an important part of that is the money will go to the state, but the legislation requires the state to be actively engaged with stakeholders, including local governments and other entities. So I think it's important that we have ideas and have a plan moving forward. We will be talking about this at the administration committee next week on our agenda as far as potentially creating a subcommittee. But we have an opportunity, I think, in St. Croix County, once we find out what happens with the PSC grants and if any of our proposals are awarded any money, to take a look at where our constituents aren't served and hopefully take advantage of some of those funds in conjunction with the state with those federal dollars. And there could be more money coming than the $100 million from the federal government too, depending on how the formulas work out. So I just like us to be prepared and be able to have a conversation and be a partner with the state.
Other questions, comments? Okay, if not, we'll move on to our business items. The first is a resolution approving grant application for Snowmobile Trail AIDS Program. Supervisor Hanson?
I move.
Move to approve. We have a second. Supervisor Adams? Discussion. Someone like to provide a little background?
The St. Croix County has about a little over 235 miles of snowmobile trails. We fund the maintenance of these trails through grants that the DNR provides, and the grants have to be renewed periodically. This grant application will put us through 2025. It doesn't cost the county any money. We get, I believe the number is a few $100s per mile, and it's something, this is kind of housekeeping for our snowmobile trails. So I'd like to ask you all to just vote for this. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions, comments? If not, we're ready to vote.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure who seconded that motion. They have to put that in.
Supervisor Adams.
Thank you.
Thank you. That resolution, or motion passes, the resolution. Second business item is the resolution approving the agreement with the members of the Hudson Area Joint Library. Supervisor Burning?
I move to table this to the next meeting.
And second by Supervisor Cook.
I just clarify, are you making a motion to postpone to the next meeting?
Postpone.
Thank you.
So, discussion, or can we provide a little background, please?
Sorry, there can be discussion.
Okay, well, would you like me to? Okay. There's still some disagreement as to the mechanics of the agreement. We're getting conflicting opinions from the Department of Revenue, so the agreement itself is not something that's finalized, so it probably doesn't seem appropriate that we vote on it at this time. Any more discussion, comments? We will vote on the motion. Oh, Supervisor Otino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to, when that does get finalized, because it's such a wide range all across the county of people involved and municipalities involved and the city involved, that we see maybe just a synopsis, even one sheet, 2 sheets, so that we can have a little bit of knowledge about it before we go for a vote. Thank you.
May take more than one sheet, but...
Well, I was being nice.
Okay, any other comments or discussion? I think we're ready to vote on the motion to postpone. Thank you. That motion is approved. Next item is a resolution supporting youth homelessness demonstration program grant. Do we have a motion to approve the resolution? Sure. Supervisor Osnes, second. Supervisor Telejohn. Would someone from, I believe, HHS like to provide some background, please?
Mr. Chairman, this grant is through the Salvation Army West Central and Rural North Homeless Coalitions. The grant is being applied for by the Salvation Army. There is no county monies that will be used for this grant. No matching funds, no asks, no nothing. The county has no responsibility to this grant. The purpose of the grant is to provide housing for homeless youth, infant to 24, provide continued education and job training, to provide emotional stabilization, mental health or drug addiction or alcohol addiction resources for persons who are within this program. It will span through the West Central counties into the rural North counties. This is a renewable grant, meaning that meeting the goals each year as is laid out in the grant proposal, which you have in your packets, the grant will be renewed.
Discussion, questions? Supervisor Burning.
The grant is coming from?
This is a HUD federal grant.
Okay, and it auto-renews, or?
It does not, no federal
comes
grant
back before
auto-renews.
this?
They have to be applied for each
Okay.
year, and the statistics coming from your programming from the previous year are what are utilized.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Van Summeren.
Well, I read through this grant application, through this whole program quite carefully. The first time I was just going to skim it through, and there's some things that actually kind of bother me. For one thing, it says the youth. When I think of youth, I don't think of someone 24 years old, someone who could be graduated from college with with their master's degree, in fact. I think of someone who, as a youth, maybe 12 years old or under. I'm not certain why this was written to include, you know, such an aged group. I find that kind of unusual. And then that kind of raises red flags in my mind. It seems as though whoever wrote this program, and I understand why they did this, they wrote it so that it can succeed, because in my research, and my research was talking to a person from another county who was actually part of our group here, and I asked him how many 18-year-old or how many youth, I didn't give him an age, how many youth actually are homeless. And he's a parole officer, so he works with youth. And he didn't think there was anyone who's living on the streets, no one, in his county. He did say there probably are some who are living with grandpa and grandma, perhaps with their friends. But so as I look at this, they stretch this youth issue to 24 years old, because that way they're going to get some participants, because by then parents are going to say it's time for you to leave home. And that's kind of how I see that. But keep in mind that in Wisconsin, in fact, in much of the U.S., at 18 years old, you can buy a weapon. You can buy an AK something or other, which we've seen demonstrated in the last couple of weeks. You can vote, you can get married, you can have an abortion, all at the age of 18. Now we've stretched that to the age of 24, and that just puts up red flags. I'm questioning, I guess, the program. Another thing I question is on page 213, it talks about the LGBTQ plus, and they say in here, and I quote, we really don't know. We're just estimating how many people there are, and they estimate that between 20 and 40% of the runaway youth are identified as LGBTQ plus, which is kind of ironic, because at the end of February there's a Gallup poll of the United States that puts that number at 7.1%, and they pointed out that that doubled during the pandemic. A lot of difference between 7.1% and 40%. A tremendous difference. Again, red flags go up in my mind. To me, it appears that a program like this would enable people to become angry with their parents and move out and be subsidized by the county, by the, you say...
Let me clarify for you.
Yeah.
Within any assessment of someone even presenting at shelter, you must have a demonstrated record of homelessness. You cannot just show up because you got mad at your mom and dad. There is a demonstrated record. Working with the school districts, working with youth organizations, these are not, we're not serving the youth or the 20 to 24-year-olds who just don't want to work. Within our state, 18, yes, you're an adult. Within the federal register, many programs reach to 24 years of age. So we have no control over the age range that is served, but we do know that we have issues with homeless youth aging out of foster care. We have issues with families that have dissolved because mom and dad have issues and are in jail, and there is no family to care for those children, and the foster care system is breaking. It's at its limit for accepting children. This is our answer to assist in West Central and rural North.
Okay, those things weren't put in this rather lengthy page, and I read it 3 times.
What you are reading is the grant proposal going to HUD. It's not going to have all of the specifics. It's going to answer what the grant requested for documentation.
However, if I can make one more comment, in order for us to make an intelligent decision on this, we have to have the facts. Not just a glossing over the facts, not just estimates. We have to have the facts.
If there's anything further I can answer for you, I will do it to the best of my ability.
No. That's fine, thank you.
Other comments, discussion, Supervisor Osnes.
Scotty, do you want to talk a little bit about, this is an area that continues to grow, whether we like it or not, and the issues. You and I both know that one. Do you want to talk just a little bit about that?
Homelessness is growing in the state of Wisconsin, and we can play with numbers all day. Any numbers that you're looking for, that you can bring forth, I can controvert with other numbers. The realization of it is, as I see every day, people are homeless. And youth are homeless because they're aging out of foster care with no support net. This is what we are trying to stop, is youth aging out of foster care or coming from a dissolved family or other situations, coming out of rehab, who do not have that safety net. They will become the adult homeless. So by stopping this, by getting a hold of these youth before they're adults and providing that safety net, we have that opportunity to provide stabilization, to provide emotional support, continued education, training. We just heard the speaker talk about the need for workers in Wisconsin. We have a large number of workers who are currently homeless, who could easily be put to work with appropriate training. This is another aspect that we work with, is trying to get people appropriately educated or continuing and finishing their education and getting them appropriately trained to go into the workforce. This grant essentially starts at the beginning, where homelessness is starting in this decade, and provides a safety net and a means to go forward and be a contributing member of society, become independent.
Sorry. Is the age range that is listed in the grant application, is that from HUD or is that from the Salvation Army?
That is from HUD.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions, discussions? Supervisor Lind?
So the Salvation Army is who's responsible for this grant coming to them. In the event that they don't qualify for the grant, does the Salvation Army then hold this program, or does this get pushed into the county?
No, not at all. Not at all. So the Salvation Army, through this program, which is not initiated at this point, this is going to be new for this region. It is established in eastern and southeastern Wisconsin to a great extent. Other areas of Wisconsin have homeless youth demonstration programs. We do not. So we are trying to get it established within this region. Nothing goes to the county. If we are not approved for the grant, then we're not approved for the grant, and we go back and try again next year.
Supervisor Hanson?
So, by way of clarification, what the Salvation Army is asking us for is a letter of support, simply. That's all there is, a letter of support from our county board for their grant application. It's like a letter of recommendation that goes along with your resume. They're asking us for a letter of support so that they can send it to HUD with a letter of recommendation from the county board, the local unit of government. Nothing more. If we have an opportunity to help homeless children, and if you've ever volunteered down at Grace Place, and I have, you'll see families come through there, and a child living with a family that's homeless is a homeless child. So the statement that there are no families, that there are no homeless children in our county is just not true, because there are homeless children in our county, and there's lots of them, because there are lots of families that work their way through Grace Place and other homeless facilities, transitional housing units. And it's tragic. And having an opportunity to serve them better just by writing a letter of recommendation is a good thing to do, and I would hope that we can do this with grace and dignity.
Oops, sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Salvation Army is a well-established, long-standing nonprofit that works in this area, and I could think, and we could say, are likely experts in this area. And as Supervisor Hanson just stated, we're basically being asked to provide support through this resolution so they can go forward and help the homeless youth and, if you want to call them young adults in this community. I don't think it really makes a difference. The point is that there is an issue out there, and if we can prevent homelessness, we're likely preventing demand on other services in our county, whether they end up in our public safety area, whatever it is. I think that it's not asking very much for us as a board to support this resolution and have a community partner move forward and help address this concern.
Other questions? Supervisor Carlson.
It's kind of a two-parter. Do we have information? You mentioned other counties have had similar programs. Is there any outcomes that we can look at and see costs, benefit?
Unfortunately, this is going way deeper than it should. But the cost benefit is in other counties. Take a look at Dane or Milwaukee County, Brown County, Racine, Douglas County have programs that are similar to this. They may not be operated by the Salvation Army, but it is the same granting through HUD that permits their programs to exist.
And then my second question is if we do not provide this, does that sink their grant, or does it?
No, it does
this
not.
just makes it easier?
What it says, in signing the resolution, in voting an approval of that resolution, it just says that St. Croix County is supporting the efforts of addressing homeless youth and the issues that surround homeless youth within west central and rural north of Wisconsin. If you do not vote for it, if it does not pass, then that is up to the public as to how they will view that. But in this instance, there is no money to be invested by St. Croix County. There is no ask. There is no responsibility. Essentially, your resolution is a reference letter to HUD saying we support these efforts.
Other questions? Discussion? Okay, I think we're ready to vote. Not sure of the count, but it looks like that motion passes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Scotty. Okay, let's move on to our fourth business item, County Administrator appointment of our new HR Director.
And thank you, Chair Long. So we did external recruitment, interviewed actually many candidates. It actually spanned over. We had started with Supervisor Long participating in it as chair of the Administration Committee. And then over April when we transitioned, Administration Committee Chair Cook took over, sitting in on the interviews as we went through a second round of them. Ultimately, though, who we selected for my recommendation was an employee currently working with us. She has 18 years of experience in human resource management, 2 years with the county. And funny enough, I had actually approached her about 8 to 10 months ago because she was such a great employee for the county and said, would you ever be interested in, considering the HR director position if it ever becomes available? And she said, oh no, I just really love my job that I'm doing now. But we were able to convince her, and I think she'll make an excellent HR director for the county. So Audrey Haycraft is my recommendation.
So we do need a motion to approve. Supervisor Cook?
I'll move to approve the appointment of Audrey Haycraft.
And the second, Supervisor Ramberg. Discussion. Okay, Supervisor Cook?
Yeah, I don't have, just add to Administrator Witt's comment. I did have an opportunity to sit in on the interview, and I think she's going to do a great job. She's just a lot of energy that she brought to the interview and to the position, and as you can see by the information in the packet, she has some good experience, so I think it's great.
Other comments, discussion? If not, we're ready to vote on the motion to approve. There we go. And that's unanimous approval. Congratulations, Audrey. Okay, we are now ready to move on to our annual department report for today. There are Health and Human Services. Bob, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My leg fell asleep. No offense to anyone. Welcome and good evening, everyone. So in your packets, you'll find our HHS 2021 annual report. I know it's rather lengthy. We provide a lot of different services, and it's difficult to explain them concisely. So what we tried to do was put together for each division narratives that gave you some sense of what the division does, and then put in some metrics to show measures of where some of these initiatives are at, or where some of these service areas are at. So we've included, this year too, we've included organizational charts at the end of each division report so that you can kind of see how the divisions are structured and what positions are included in each area. And I've invited some of the division managers tonight, in case you have questions when I'm done, that I can't answer, and they can help me do that. But the areas outlined in the report include administration and records, Aging and Disabilities Resource Center, Behavioral Health Services, Children's Services, Comprehensive Community Services, Economic Support, the Healthcare Campus, Public Health, and then our finance team, of course, works with us in HHS. I just wanted to touch on a few things. I know those of you in the HHS committee have already heard me talk about the report, so this will be sort of an abridged version of what I provided to you at the HHS committee meeting, but we are here to answer your questions. If you've had a chance to review this report and you have specific questions, we'll do our best to answer them. If we can't answer them, we'll get back to you quickly with a response. But just to give you some updates of what took place in 2021, I think some events that might be worth mentioning to you. In June of 2021, we hired Michelle Lesha as our Children's Services Administrator, replacing Julie Krings in that position. And then in December of 2021, Brad Beckman, who was our ADRC Administrator for about 10 years, our only ADRC Administrator, I believe, retired. And we began the recruitment process, which led to Kristen Newton being hired as our ADRC Administrator early this year. And then in the spring of 2021, the County Board approved some ARPA initiatives that HHS had put forward. The majority of these initiatives had to do with early intervention and crisis intervention kinds of efforts, for example, like co-responders with law enforcement, community-based case managers, and we have a position here at the Government Center to work with criminal justice involved persons, all in the effort to try and divert people away from jail, away from hospitals, and serve them in the community more effectively. And those have been initiated this year, but in 2021 we received the funding for that, so the planning and the program development began in the second half of last year. The other initiatives that were approved and some were spent, some dollars were spent in 2021 include bonuses to healthcare campus staff who went above and beyond, in my opinion, for during the pandemic, the worst of the pandemic, to keep our residents safe, keep their staff safe. And we upgraded 2 electronic health records, one for public health and one for behavioral health. If I can, I'll just move on to a couple of bullet points, a couple of talking points for each division, and then I'll open it up for questions from you. In the ADRC, the Aging and Disabilities Resource Center, despite the pandemic, the ADRC services and programming continued throughout 2021 with measured increases in nearly all service areas. What we did see was a drop. We had to close some of our senior centers for periods of time due to pandemic outbreaks in those centers, or just to prevent people from getting sick during the worst of the pandemic. And during that time, our we delivered meals to people's homes. I think we delivered almost 5,000 additional meals to people in their homes because we couldn't serve them in the senior center nutrition sites. There's a page in your packet in the annual report that also demonstrates some of the return on investment for ADRC services. It's a one-pager kind of summary from the state report that shows that every dollar invested in ADRC leads to an estimated savings of about $2.48. And a lot of that's due to helping to keep people in their homes and preventing them from having to go to emergency departments or hospital admissions or readmissions. We also we have a strong volunteer pool in the ADRC. We just had a volunteer banquet last month, I believe, where we estimate that our volunteers provided about 70,000 hours worth of volunteer time, which equates to roughly $185,000 that we saved because of the volunteers' efforts. It was a very nice banquet, by the way. Okay, moving on to behavioral health. Just a couple of points here. We did see an increase in adult protection cases and elder abuse cases in 2021. We also saw hospital bed capacity reduced due to COVID-19, leading to an increase in admissions at the Winnebago Mental Health Institute. And this next trend continues into today. It's actually increasing. An increase in substance use and mental health petition for care. We've seen numbers on our wait list grow over the past year and in 2021 into the current year. So our wait list is extended, and we're looking at, currently, we're looking at methods of addressing that wait list through some shuffling of staff and reprioritizing of our staff. That's a trend that we anticipated, from the pandemic. Anytime there's a financial and social kind of event of that magnitude, you can anticipate an increase in all of the above with substance use, mental health, and unfortunately with things like elder abuse and the challenges associated with that. But in children's services, we saw in 2021, we saw an increase in the number of kids in out-of-home care. That also is a continuing challenge for us. We are invested, I won't go into what we're doing now so much because this is a report on 2021, but in 2021 we began planning efforts to engage families differently through the services center. How can we engage these families earlier in the process in order to mitigate some of the challenges they might face going forward if they didn't have that kind of support. So we're looking at nonprofit communities, providers in our community that can support us in a partnership where we serve families outside of the scope of our official service delivery to provide a place for them to come and get help or information about whatever their needs might be. It's an ongoing challenge, though, and it's not just us, it's every county in the state, every state in the union. Comprehensive Community Services, or CCS, is the next division I wanted to mention. Their enrollment increased throughout 2021 to pre-pandemic levels and continues to increase today, which is a good thing. It's a very individualized, sort of non-traditional approach to helping people with substance use and mental health disorders. Our economic support services. In 2021, there is currently a public health emergency that allows people to maintain their health coverage, children's health insurance and Medicaid health insurance. So we didn't take anyone off of their health insurance in 2021 as a result of the public health emergency. And that did help a lot of people continue to get their health care services in spite of the fact that they may have not been eligible at some point in 2021. That public health emergency will end later this summer, in which case there will be what's called an unwinding, and those people that no longer qualify for health insurance will be dropped from the Medicaid and Children's Health Insurance Program. We're preparing for that. The healthcare campus saw admissions decline in skilled nursing in 2021, primarily due to hospitals not having elective surgeries, so people weren't coming there for rehabilitation services as much. And again, I'll just stick to 2021. So, conversely, though, we saw an average daily census for independent living increase in 2021, nearly doubling from 2019. And then lastly, I was just going to mention that public health has to do an annual report for the state. So they put together their own annual report, and I looked at it and thought it was very well done, and I just added that to our annual report. So what it does, though, is it provides some insight, I think, into the different areas of public health that you may not hear too much about: environmental health, women, infants, and children, things that you can look at in there and see the scope of what they do. Healthier Together is another example of community needs assessments and action plans that they put together. But I will stop there for now and see what questions you have, and we'll try and answer them.
Questions? Supervisor Rambert?
In regard to behavioral health and public safety or employee safety, I would imagine there's a partnership with like the sheriff or whatnot. That sounds like there has to be a delicate balance there. I suppose there's protocol in place, especially now during what we've experienced the last year or two. I guess my question is not specifically, but how do your employees know when to call a partner in when they visit a home or bring in a behavioral health client?
Yes, so that's a good point. There's a natural symbiosis between public health and public safety. The two go together, and it's balancing that interaction in a way that's effective. So there's a couple of examples I can give you. For example, with the ARPA-funded co-responder positions, the co-responder would go with law enforcement to a place and assess whether that situation was safe or not for the person from behavioral health to stay there while the police leave. Just as an overall point to make is that most people, well, people with mental health diagnoses are no more dangerous than the general public. In fact, if they're being treated, they're less dangerous than the general public. So there is always, though, attention to safety when someone's going to an environment that they don't know what to expect. And our workers are trained to assess in any given situation when there may be a potential threat or some sort of unsafe environment that they shouldn't be in. And they'll either leave or they'll contact 911. But it's difficult to say in a very specific way what they would do in any situation, but they are trained and they have a high tolerance for risk. So there's oftentimes a confidence within them that allows them to manage situations that maybe others wouldn't be able to.
Questions, Supervisor Osnes?
Bob, can you talk a little bit about ARPA funding and how that's helped us and some of the different positions that we've been able to hire on at no cost to the county?
Sure. Well, as I alluded to earlier, the ARPA-funded positions that we filled, they're not just case managers. We also had 2 positions for peer recovery specialists, which are people with lived experience that work with individuals with mental health or addiction needs. And then we have the community-based case managers that go wherever they are needed in the community to work with people on site. Say, since Scotty was here from Grace Place, that's an example of where they might go and talk to people that have behavioral health needs in that setting, but they could go anywhere in the community to do that. And that was the idea, was engaging people differently in the community, so they're not expected to come to an office setting for an appointment, right? Because oftentimes their executive functioning is such that they're not going to be able to keep appointments. And it's not realistic to expect that. So we go to where they are and we meet with them. The other two positions, as I mentioned, are with co-responders, and then the one here at the Government Center that works with justice-involved folks prior to them being, what's the word, adjudicated? Yes, is that work? All right. What am I leaving out? And again, the overall intention of this is earlier intervention, to go upstream of the problem. What we have is a healthcare, I won't go into a long diatribe, but what we have is a healthcare system that often reacts to crisis. And when we do that, it costs more money and the outcomes are worse. So what we're trying to do is shift the system gradually towards upstream kinds of solutions that help people earlier in that process and prevent them from ending up in hospitals, prevent them from ending up in jail. And the last thing I'll say around that is that I just attended a summit in New England that was intended to look at how the court system works with people with mental health and addiction needs. And the primary focus of that was diversion, diverting people with mental health and addiction needs away from criminal kinds of consequences to getting them the help they need, and then tracking them throughout that process, always with the ability to come back and apply sanctions to them. But it's the movement of our healthcare system in general to move upstream, to do things that prevent people from ending up in crisis. That's what we're trying to do with these ARPA positions primarily.
Other questions? I did have one for you, if I may, Bob. I had noticed on, actually I'm referring to page 339 in the packet, there on regarding the healthcare campus. And it appears, if I'm interpreting this correctly, that in 2020 there was actually an operating loss, a fairly substantial one for 2020, and maybe for very good reason. But I was just curious as to if you had any, could share any background there, and if you've seen that trend continue into 2021.
Into 2021 from 2020?
Correct.
Yeah. Well, there was, as I said, a reduction in rehabilitation services. There was a reduction in admissions overall because people didn't feel safe, oftentimes referring a senior to that center where they were fearful they could get COVID-19. The general answer to that is the impact of the pandemic on admissions to the facility and on rehabilitation services being reduced. We anticipated in 2020, as we did the budget, trying to look forward, we thought probably by mid-year of 2021 we would see vaccines available and we would see a relaxing of precautions and other kinds of concerns related to the pandemic, therefore seeing an increase in some admissions and rehabilitation services. We saw instead a resurgence of the pandemic in 2021, which created some of the same issues on top of workforce issues. Going forward, I can say beyond 2021, we do see some light at the end of the tunnel, though, with respect to not just workforce solutions that we've put together, but also the return of people being, or the increase of people being referred for rehabilitation services and for admissions to assisted living. So we're seeing the trend go the other direction, thankfully, but in 2020 and 2021, most of the problems that we experienced financially and with respect to operations had to do with the pandemic.
Other questions? All right, thank you very much, Bob.
Sure. I do have some copies if anybody wants them of the report. Thank you.
Any requests for future agenda items? Supervisor Burning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple things I'd like to have at some point in time in the next couple of meetings. It doesn't have to be the next one, but one, I'd like to have public protection and maybe ADRC or some subset of Health and Human Services that deal with our retiree population and our more seasoned human beings, that we take a look at how we can educate or work in conjunction with senior care facilities in dealing with scam calls and the response to it and how to mitigate that. And then the next thing is I would like at some point in time, maybe later part of summer, is to have a full recap of the last 2 years in our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'd like to see that from Health and Human Services.
I would say that your first item probably should be referred to the committee. Would that be ADRC or?
I would think ADRC. Yeah, I would think the referring to scams with seniors would be something ADRC would typically deal with. I'm looking at the back row there. Yeah, yeah. So I would recommend that committee for that issue.
Okay.
Yep, and then the recap on COVID response would be Health and Human Services.
HHS, yes.
Okay.
Other requests for agenda items? Do we have any county clerk's report or correspondence and rezoning requests?
I just have this one, if you will, sign-up sheet for anyone who wants to attend the upcoming September WCA conference. You don't have to give it back to me now, but maybe in the next week or so, either just email me and let me know if you want to go. But if you want to give it back to me now, you can. I do have, they're not really going to do a brochure, but I do have the information on what will be at that meeting. If anybody wants to see that, they can pick it up here. Otherwise, I'll give it to you when you decide that you want to go. But I do have copies up here if you want them today. That's all.
Christine, are you offering the first-time supervisor deal? They're going for some kind of a break like they have in the past?
I believe so, yes. I believe that there is, yes.
Yeah. Fill us in later.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Anything else? Okay, and other announcements. Supervisor Fiedler.
Actually, maybe Bob or Adam would care to comment on it more extensively, but in short, tomorrow night up at the Community College in New Richmond at 6 o'clock, we're going to be having a suicide prevention program that Bob and Adam and Patty Shackner and several other members of the staff have worked on extensively for the past half year. And it's the first of a series of programs that will occur over the coming year addressing mental health issues. So it's at 6 o'clock tomorrow night at the Community College, and you're all invited.
Other announcements? Oh, Administrator Witt. What do we?
Well, thank you, everyone, for participating in the county board photo this evening before the meeting. And if you enjoyed that, you have another opportunity tomorrow. There is a groundbreaking photo opportunity for you. Adrc Building Solutions is going to be doing the groundbreaking on the new Glen Hills group camping area. So Glen Hills Park tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. You're invited to participate in that.
Okay, other announcements. Make sure I'm looking around here. Supervisor Counter.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I passed out a little blue flyer that everybody may have got a hold of, but I just wanted to tell you just real briefly about the Freedom Park Center, which has been in a proposed format for close to 9 years. And it is becoming a new home for the New Richmond Area Senior Center and a new Veterans Center. This proposed facility has just started construction in the last 2 weeks with employment of both vertical and horizontal military engineering units from both Wisconsin and Minnesota. They had received the Pentagon had received a request from us to allow these military organizations to work on our behalf, and had signed off to allow these units to provide their annual training for this entire summer and next summer to build this facility. And in the process of them working with us, we're providing local contractors from the Richmond area that are masters in electrical, plumbing, heating, and structural to supervise and train the soldiers as they're doing the work to make them better at their positions in the military. So they've just started the sewer water line extensions and the digging of the frost footings, and by the end of this summer, they will have the footings in the ground. Next spring, they will start the brick and mortar from the ground up. This will be, with the Veterans Center portion, this will be one of the first outreach programs from the VA Medical Center out of the cities to allow psychologists and other mental health professionals to be able to work at the New Richmond facility for soldiers in St. Croix, Pierce, Polk, and Dunn counties to be able to come here instead of going over to Minneapolis for mental health services, and hopefully train intervention teams to help at the facility itself. There's a lot of other benefits that are going on here along with the senior center and everything that are kind of outlined in the flyer if you take a look, but I just wanted to bring it to everybody's attention. It's underway, and if anybody wanted to check it out, it's over at Freedom Park on the northwest side in New Richmond. Thank you.
Okay, other announcements? Okay, seeing none, 6:33, we are adjourned.